So, picture this. It's a Tuesday morning, late April 2025. Forget the usual postcards of the Kashmir Valley for a second. Gull Lake, the mountains.
Right.
Instead, imagine this convoy of buses. They're moving through that same, well, incredible landscape.
Okay.
But these aren't tourists. Inside, there are 60 people, mostly women and children, and they're all holding Pakistani passports. And their destination isn't some scenic spot. It's the Wagah border. They're being sent across into Pakistan.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really striking image, isn't it? Buses, people who've maybe lived there for years.
Exactly.
Being driven away from the place they call home. It immediately tells you, there's a much deeper story here than just the headlines.
Absolutely. This wasn't just like a routine crossing. It was a deportation. 60 Pakistani nationals moved out of Jammu and Kashmir.
And not in a vacuum, you mentioned.
No, not at all. This happened just days after that horrific terror attack in Pahalgam. And it also puts a spotlight, a really harsh one, on a rehabilitation policy from back in 2010. But here's the detail that really caught my attention. Among those people on the buses was a woman named Shameema Akhtar.
Shameema Akhtar.
Yes. And Shameema is the mother of Mudasir Ahmad Shaikh. He was a special police officer, a local hero, actually. He died fighting terrorists in May 2022.
The mother of a fallen police officer.
Yes. Think about that. A mother whose son was celebrated, for his bravery for defending that very region. She's now being deported after living in Kashmir for 45 years.
45 years.
45 years. So the question is, how does that happen? How does the mother of a hero end up on a deportation bus?
That really puts a sharp personal edge on what could otherwise just seem like a policy issue, doesn't it? Her son's sacrifice for India's security, her own decades there. It's a deeply unsettling paradox.
It really is. And as we've kind of pieced together what happened based on reports and official statements, a really complex picture starts to emerge.
Yeah.
It's a story tangled up with, national security fears, that rehabilitation policy, which maybe didn't quite work out as planned.
Right. The unintended consequences.
Exactly. And most importantly, the actual lives of people caught right in the middle of it all.
So our goal here for you listening is to really unpack this, to get beyond the immediate news cycle and understand all the different things converging here.
We want to look at the borders, both the physical ones and the political ones, the bonds these people formed in Kashmir, and the often incredibly complicated bureaucracy behind decisions like this.
And importantly, keeping the focus on the human stories. Those often get lost when we talk about geopolitics, don't they?
They really do. So, okay, let's look closer at how this actually unfolded on the ground.
Right.
This wasn't some secret operation. These 60 people, they were gathered from different districts across Jammu and Kashmir.
From where specifically?
Let's see. Srinagar had the largest number, 36. Then 9 from Baramulla, 9 from Kupwara, 4 from Bugmam, and 2 from Shopian.
Okay, so quite spread out.
Yeah. And the significant thing here is these were people living openly. They weren't like hiding out. They were part of the community, part of daily life in those places.
That's a really crucial point, actually. It sort of challenges any quick assumption that they were somehow involved in illegal activity, doesn't it? Living openly suggests some level of, integration, maybe even acceptance, however complicated their legal status might have been.
Exactly. Now, the trigger event seems pretty clear. That terrible attack in Pahalgam, April 22nd, 2025. 26 tourists killed. Just horrific.
Horrific.
And India's response was, immediate and strong. Visas for Pakistanis suspended. The Wagah border suddenly closed. And then these deportations followed very quickly.
It was a fast, forceful reaction.
Wow.
The timeline points pretty directly from the attack to these measures. You can see the government wanting to project a really strong stance against cross-border terrorism.
Understandable, in a way.
Yes, but the speed and how broad these actions were, it definitely raises questions about the impact on people who had, long established lives in India.
Which brings us right back to Shameema Akhtar. Her story it captures the human tragedy here so starkly.
45 years, you said?
45 years she lived in Kashmir. Came over when she was just 20. Her family originated in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Bokeh.
Okay.
And then you have the story of her son, Mudasir. Died a hero, fighting terrorists in May 2022. His bravery was acknowledged at the highest levels. We're talking visits from the Union Home Minister Amit Shah, the Lieutenant Governor. They visited the family, offered condolences, recognized his sacrifice.
The contrast is it's jarring, isn't it? A son gives his life for the security of the region, and his mother, despite living there nearly half a century, despite her son's heroism, she's deported. possibly to a place she barely knows anymore.
Exactly. And her brother-in-law, Muhammad Yunus, he spoke out. He made this point about Poke being our territory, referencing India's claim.
Right, adding another layer of complexity.
And he made this direct plea to Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah. He said, my Bobby was 20 when she came here. She's been here for 45 years. Don't do this. You can just feel the emotion in that, the sense of injustice.
Yeah, that quote really hits home. It highlights not just the political complexities Rome posed, but the sheer length of time she spent building a life there, 45 years. That's not a short visit, it's most of her life.
Right.
His plea just powerfully shows the human cost when these big security decisions are made, maybe without enough thought for individual situations.
So how did so many people with Pakistani links end up living in Kashmir for so long anyway? That takes us to the 2010 rehabilitation policy.
Ah, yes, the policy. What was the original idea behind that?
Well, the aim was basically to encourage former militants, guys who'd crossed over into Pakistan mostly back in the 1990s, to come back, to give up arms, return home, and rejoin society.
So an attempt at reconciliation, really, offering a way back for those who'd been involved in the militancy, trying to foster peace.
Exactly. And when these men returned, quite a few brought their families with them. Pakistani wives, kids born over there. They came back hoping to start fresh in Kashmir.
Makes sense.
But here's where the problem seems to have cropped up. There was a critical oversight. Not enough attention was paid to the legal status of these families.
You mean the wives and children?
Yeah. Women like Shameema, who held Pakistani passports or came from Poke, they often ended up in this kind of legal limbo, stuck with temporary visas, no clear path to Indian citizenship.
Ah, I see. So the policy focused on the returning men, but didn't fully sort out the long-term legal standing for their non-Indian family members.
Seems like it.
Which created this vulnerable group, right? People whose legal status was shaky for years.
Precisely. So the people being deported now, they aren't just random individuals. Many of them built lives in Kashmir under really tough circumstances, often specifically because their husbands or fathers took the government's offer of rehabilitation.
They invested in that offer, essentially.
They did. They built lives, raised families, and now, years down the line, they're being kicked out.
It really shows how policies, even those started with good intentions, can have really deep, unforeseen human impacts if all the details, especially the long-term status of everyone involved, aren't thought through carefully.
Yeah.
That 2010 policy, looking back now, it seems it unintentionally created this legal gray zone for these families, making them vulnerable when political tensions spiked.
And that spike definitely happened after the Pahalgam attack. India's reaction, that zero-tolerance stance on cross-border terrorism, seems to be the direct driver for these deportations affecting long-term residents.
Which leads to that really difficult question. While the need for security is clear, is this kind of broad-stroke approach the fairest or even the most effective way to deal with it, especially for people with such deep roots in India?
It's a tough one. And it wasn't just the deportees. There was another group caught up in this too, wasn't there?
Yes, that's right. Around the same time, there was the issue with Pakistani women who actually had permission to be in India.
You mean the ones with NRI certificates?
Exactly. No objection to return to India certificates. Over 70 women, apparently, holding these NORI papers and valid long-term visas. They'd gone to Pakistan, maybe to visit family.
Right.
And then the border suddenly closed after the Pahalgam attack. They were stuck at the Atari border, unable to get back to their families in India.
Even though they had all the right paperwork.
Even though they had the documents, it just highlights how suddenly everything was disrupted by the border closure and the heightened tensions.
It sounds incredibly frustrating. Almost Kafkaesque, Women with husbands, kids, homes in India, holding the legal right to be here, but caught in this diplomatic crossfire.
Absolutely. They became entangled in the tit-for-tat, basically. Reports suggest it took a lot of negotiation, bureaucratic hurdles on both sides, before an exception was finally made to let them cross back into India.
It's just a stark reminder, isn't it? How easily individuals become collateral damage in these bigger disputes. They followed the rules, had the right papers, but their lives were just thrown into chaos because of their nationality at a tense moment.
Precisely. Unintended casualties of political friction.
And the human cost, it goes beyond even those two groups, the deportees and the NRI holders.
Yeah, are there individual stories surfacing, too?
Yeah, quite a few. We heard about a woman named Sarada Bai, 55 years old, originally from Odisha, but facing deportation after living in India for 35 years. Why? Because she holds a Pakistani passport. Her family, understandably, is going through immense
For
stress.
35 years.
Then there's Salana. She's an Indian woman. She was stopped at Atari, but her children, who hold Pakistani passports, were allowed to cross.
Oh, wow. Separated.
Yeah, her quote was heartbreaking. "My children can't stay here and I can't go there." It just captures the impossible situation some families are in.
That's devastating.
And these aren't just isolated cases. Since late April, apparently over 500 Pakistanis have left India via Atari. People leaving behind relatives, jobs, lives suddenly upended.
Each of those stories just paints such a powerful, deeply moving picture of the real human fallout from these decisions. It takes it away from abstract policy and puts it right into tangible suffering, doesn't it? The connections built across that border, the lives intertwine, and how suddenly they can be broken.
It really feels like a human tragedy playing out under this banner of security measures, and it's all happening alongside bigger diplomatic moves too, right?
Yes. India's response to Pahalgam wasn't just the deportations and border closure. They also suspended parts of the Indus Waters Treaty, expelled some diplomats, taking significant steps aimed at Pakistan.
And Pakistan retaliated.
Retaliatory steps were taken, yes. Things like closing airspace, suspending trade. It becomes this tit-for-tat situation.
Highlighting the incredibly tense relationship between the two countries.
Exactly. Both sides are making strong moves, signaling their positions. But, as always seems to happen, it's the ordinary people on both sides who really feel the brunt of these decisions most acutely.
So we come back to those really fundamental questions that these deportations force us to ask. Is it fair? Is it just to target people who've lived in India for decades, especially someone like Shameema Akhtar, with such clear ties whose son died for the country?
Right.
And what does it signal about that 2010 rehabilitation policy? If the families of the very people encouraged to return are now being deported, it seems almost, I don't know, contradictory.
That's exactly the tension, isn't it? The policy was meant to bring people back, reintegrate them. Now, deporting their families seems to undermine the whole premise of that policy. It raises serious questions about, well, trust and whether government commitments hold firm over time.
So wrapping up this deep dive into what is frankly a really complex and sensitive issue, the main takeaways seem to be about the huge human cost of these geopolitical flare-ups.
And the sheer complexity of border policies.
And definitely some very serious questions about how fair and how effective these recent actions really are.
Ultimately, Shameema Akhtar's story and what's happening more broadly, it leaves us, and you listening, with a really profound question to think about. In situations like this, what does belonging actually mean? And what are the long-term effects of policies that seem to put security concerns so far above established human connections, lives built over decades? It forces us to weigh the human cost and think about the need for policies that try to balance security with, well, compassion and a recognition of the lives people have actually lived.
It certainly does. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it, what happens now to those deported? Especially people like Shameema, who might have very few connections left in Pakistan after 45 years away.
What support will they receive? How will they rebuild?
And the families left behind, the ones separated by this, what are the long-term impacts on them? It's a situation with consequences that are going to ripple outwards for a long, long time.
Definitely. And it's vital to keep considering all the perspectives, especially those of the people most directly affected.